A new interview just dropped with Hidetaka Miyazaki himself, and with it came an onslaught of new info for us to piece together. This was a huge info dump, so let's just dive right in. The Lands Between, which is the name of the world in which Elden Ring takes place, will feature 6 major areas that function as distinct dungeons. Each of these dungeons will be ruled by demigod characters. You do not have to follow a specific order in which you progress through these areas. However, it will be apparent that there is an intended path. I'm totally fine with this. I know 6 dungeons doesn't sound like much, but we don't know the scope and scale of these environments. 6 dungeons already sounds bigger than Demon Souls, especially when you take into account the massive overworld, which itself is riddled with secrets and its own mini dungeons. If you're watching this video, I'm sure you've already played a FromSoft game, so you already know how they do it. Their optional areas are just as robust as their required areas. There is confirmed to be a hub, but apparently this hub is accessed later on in the game. I'm not sure if this hub is connected to the game's fast travel, because, spoilers, there is fast travel in the game. And I don't really have an opinion on this, because I don't understand its significance. This hub could be someplace where you bring all the little shards of the Elden Ring together as you defeat the demigods and then eventually access the final boss. Just like in Dark Souls when you place the Lord Vessel and access the Kiln of the First Flame. There are a variety of different area types, including catacombs, castles, fortresses, mini dungeons, and also a poisonous swamp. I'm particularly happy about the swamp. It's a necessity at this point for me. It wouldn't be a Miyazaki game without it. Speaking of Miyazaki, he went on to say that the Lands Between is actually a name that was invented by George R.R. Martin himself when he was coming up for the impetus for this world and writing its history and deep mythos. Miyazaki goes on to say, "We hope that as well as taking away the idea of it being the sort of impetus and that the starting place for the world, we want people to feel that it's really like an invitation to this mysterious new land. So you're not starting out in a hub like the Nexus and Demon Souls, you access it later on." More info from Miyazaki states that there are spirits which can be collected and equipped and used as a type of summon to aid you on your journey. These different spirits will have different attributes, and some will have certain advantages over others in different situations. For example, some will be used for offensive purposes, some for defense, and others as a decoy, etc. These spirits can be improved, and there are other seemingly useless spirits which have other traits. Not really sure what that means, but I get the feeling this might be some trolly spirits that might be used maybe for fun in PvP. I don't know, but we know FromSoft has a great sense of humor, so I'm sure there's going to be some hilarious antics because of them. As for how they're improved, I don't really know. I don't know if maybe the more you use them, eventually they acquire their own EXP and maybe they level up. I kind of like that idea, but if not, maybe you can use some resource to actually level them up yourself and upgrade them. There is multiplayer support when exploring the open fields of the world, but you are not able to ride your horse in multiplayer apparently. This is interesting. And I don't know if this means we might not see too much multiplayer in the open fields or what, because I imagine much of it might be quite the pain in the butt to traverse without a mount, especially since some areas seem impossible to traverse without one. Regarding PvP though, I am glad to announce that PvP is in. However, they are trying to make it less annoying for both players, those who enjoy PvP and those who don't. The term optional appears to be used, but we do not know context. And they have reduced the amount of resources required for multiplayer, as they want it to be accessible for as many players as possible at all times. And since the world of Elden Ring is huge, it can be difficult to find summoning signs to summon. So, to alleviate this issue, they are highlighting specific locations where players can leave their signs or see who is currently available to play. This is the thing about me. I'm kinda scummy when it comes to PvP. Like, I'm the type of guy that would love it if PvP was forced on everyone. But I understand many people don't like that stuff, so I understand where they're coming from. And also, so that battles don't turn into endless games of hide and seek, they are adding interface elements that provide enough info to both participants in the confrontation. I'm not sure what this means. Like, on one hand, I would think that maybe you can see the invader's location on your map. Spoilers, there is a world map. But then what about when you're in a dungeon, as there are no maps in the dungeons themselves? The only other thing is if there was some kind of UI implementation that always pointed you in their direction, like a compass, but I doubt that is the case, as that doesn't line up with FromSoftware's game style. So I'm not really sure what this means, but I know personally I love those long, drawn-out PvP matches where you spend forever just trying to find the players. Like, what about things like the chameleon spell and whatnot? They're useless if you know where the player is. But during co-op, it's confirmed that players will be returned to their respective worlds upon defeating a boss. This is fine, it's whatever. Covenants are in, but they are not a requirement for multiplayer. They are mainly used for role-playing purposes to add a distinct flavor to the game. I'm fine with this. That's basically how stuff like the Blades of the Dark Moon worked. I don't think covenants should be mandatory for any reason anyways. So, like I mentioned earlier, there is a fast travel system, but they want you to enjoy exploration. So we do not know if fast travel is unlocked from the get-go. Like I mentioned previously, I'm thinking it might be tied to that hub area, but who knows? Miyazaki goes on to say that due to the increase of the game's scope and the distance in which players progress, they wanted to make sure that there was a way for players to retain their progress so they don't get discouraged. To give an example, he mentions Sekiro's resurrection mechanic and leads us to expect something similar for Elden Ring spiritually, but clarifies that there is no resurrection in Elden Ring. So I don't know what this could be. Possibly a ring like the Ring of Sacrifice, but I feel like that's not it. That's too cheap. They're not just gonna steal the same thing from Dark Souls and make it a big part of the game. So I really don't know what this is. Do you have any idea what he could be referring to? So apparently Elden Ring is more manageable difficulty-wise due to there being so many options for progression and playstyles, but there are still many tough enemies. Makes sense. This is one of the reasons why Sekiro is so tough. Yes, there are different ways you can defeat enemies, but your build is never going to be as diverse as a Souls game, so naturally more options to proceed should mean less frustrated players overall. And lastly, fall damage is in the game, but low to keep explorers motivated. I get it, whatever. I don't really care either way. Fall damage won't matter when you fall into a bottomless pit and hit that death box. Like I said earlier, there is a world map. However, the actual dungeons do not have a map. I think I'm okay with this, especially if it is something similar to Sekiro's map, which to this day, many people don't even know exists. I'm sure the map will just be a basic overview of the world. It isn't going to spell out the secrets to the players because they want the players to create their own adventure. Miyazaki said there are no quest markers on the map. Players have to set their own quest markers. They want the world to be interesting, they said, not just a blank open field with which the main lands are connected. The world is compared to Breath of the Wild. However, the world is seemingly more interesting to explore, with weapons, skills, and other items and NPCs all scattered throughout. The stamina meter is back, however it is not as important as it was in previous games. Not really sure what they mean by this. Possibly there are more ways to play, and stamina being able to simply brute force your way through won't be as important. Previously, endurance was a very important stat due to how it affected stamina and things like equip burden, so I'm curious to see how it plays out in Elden Ring. It's confirmed that there is a crafting system with materials, and it almost seems like it implies that healing items need to be crafted, but this is unconfirmed. I have also heard that there are more ways to heal than previously before. He goes on again to put emphasis on freedom of play, particularly regarding skills, saying that in previous games they were attached to specific weapons, but now you are freely able to attach and interchange skills between a large variety of weapons. And there are over 100 skills overall. Hell yeah. This is awesome, especially if these skills are found throughout the world. Talk about rewarding exploration and super unique character builds. Stealth has a rather simple role in the game, allowing you to crouch and sneak past enemies. Once again, allowing for more diversity in playstyles. This is fine, as I don't want this to be a stealth game, but give me that option in case I need it. Miyazaki confirms that the summons we see in the trailer are not other players, but other spirit summons from enemies past. The more I think about this, the more I like it. Imagine an enemy as a type of Pokemon. Maybe it's a rare drop in which you get the essence of so-and-so or whatever, but this allows you to summon your very own familiar of that enemy and just like romp around with them. Just imagine playing through Dark Souls with your very own Black Knight bodyguard. That's what I'm talking about, man. The way the lore of the world is discovered and pieced together has not changed, says Miyazaki. His design philosophy remains largely intact, and this is great news. Hopefully it puts some people's concerns at rest. I never doubted the Big M though, not once. Miyazaki guesses that playtime is maybe at about 30 hours without too many side trips, he says. Now, I know what you're thinking, but wait. This game is supposed to be huge, so how could it be possibly less than 300 hours long? Wah, wah, wah. Well, try not to freak out about this. We already know there is a set path with which players can follow if they want to. I imagine that has minimal exploration, so I'm sure if you really take your time and explore this world and uncover every nook and cranny, that time will easily double. So, with that being said, just breathe. I'm sure Eldenring is going to be plenty long. There are apparently multiple endings based on your path and choices throughout the game. Okay, we don't exactly know what this means, but I'm assuming it is probably something like the different endings in previous Souls games. That's cool. You can skip some bosses, but not all. This probably ties in with what we know about possible multiple endings. Much like Soulsborne games, there are many optional bosses. I'm sure that the 6 demigods in their dungeons are mandatory. The final boss as well. And then there are probably 1 or 2 other ones before the 6 demigods, which are also mandatory. That puts us at about 8 to 10 mandatory bosses. I'm sure that number will be at least 15 or possibly even double once you factor in the optional ones. There are many NPCs, but the game will not feature cities nor villages. This is par the course for Souls games. We know they relish in the beauty of the decayed. I love that contrast personally, and it is a constant theme in my songwriting. Much of the lore we will hear in Elden Ring will refer to things that have happened long ago in the past, and it will be up to us to connect the dots and imagine the beauty which the lands between once possessed. Apparently, the mount is only available in the open world section of the game, even when playing solo. I guess it makes sense for the sake of level design. However, I wonder if there is a narrative reason for this. I feel like FromSoft is usually pretty good at tying gameplay elements into the narrative, which goes a long way towards keeping my immersion personally. But one thing I want to mention about mounts only being available in the open world, well, it confirms that there are open world bosses, which means that this thing and this dude are both in the open world. Holy shit. This is awesome. I bet this dude is optional, and I really hope he is someone who can show up randomly and just wreck your shit when you least expect it. But then I wonder, is the mount mandatory for this fight? Because it kinda looks like it. If the mount is mandatory, then how do you use summons for the fight if you need to? I always get good, so I'm not concerned about it, but I know some people will be. Maybe the mount isn't mandatory for the fight after all. But how else are you gonna fight this thing? It looks like you really need all the speed you can get. There are some enemies that only appear during the night. This is awesome. I cannot wait to learn more about the day-night cycle. I wonder how quickly a day goes by. I'm hoping it's a little longer than in most games. At least 40 minutes for a day and 40 minutes for a night. I might be okay with hour-long day and night cycles too. I just feel like the 20 minutes you usually see in a lot of games, it isn't enough. And there is some kind of guild matchmaking system where you can place an ad for a co-op partner. Not entirely sure what this entails, to be honest. I need to hear more info. I know the game uses summoning signs like Dark Souls, but beyond that, I don't understand. Possibly something like Sumbro, summoning each other for co-op maybe because they're in the same covenant? I don't know. Miyazaki states that the bosses were written by George R.R. Martin. These are the demigods in each of the dungeons, and they inherited the mad taint power of the Elden Ring shards once it was shattered. Miyazaki says they wanted to depict these beings as not just creatures and horrible monsters, but have an element of heroism and an element of mythology to them as well. Essentially, they are the old gods of this world. And part of the design of these major characters is that in inheriting the shards of the Elden Ring, they each inherited a different power or element. And each was twisted and warped in its own way, and it brought a tainted strength to each of them. They each fell to madness and fell to ruin in their own individual ways. So while there is heroic and mythological elements to them, they are also going to have this very mad taint and this deep-seated ruin to them. We hope players enjoy discovering each of them for themselves, says Miyazaki. Again, this harkens back to the beauty in the decay that I love so much. Mimics aren't in the game as we know them, but there are other ways in which they plan to surprise you. Alright Miyazaki, bring it on. I already saw your little pot bros with arms and they ain't scaring me. I want one for a pet. And here's a little lore dump from Famitsu. The golden tree gives grace to everyone in the land, but long ago there were some who lost the grace and were exiled. They lost the golden hue of their eyes and were called the Tarnished. However, the shattering of the ring released some grace that then reverted to the progeny of the exiled who are now being guided back to the lands in between. And here is something similar in an IGN version. The lands between are blessed by the presence of the Elden Ring and by the Erd Tree, which symbolizes its presence, and this has given grace or blessing to the people throughout the land, great and small. What this represented in them is a sort of golden light, or this golden aura that is specifically shown in their eyes, and this symbolizes the blessing of the grace of the Erd Tree. However, after a time, there were some individuals who lost this grace, and the light faded from their eyes, and these are what are known as the Tarnished. So, the Tarnished, as they are called, are those who have lost grace, and this was a long time preceding the setting of the game, a long time before. The ancestors of the characters that are present in the world were banished and exiled from the lands between. Then, a long time after that, the Elden Ring was shattered in a historical event. This triggers the return of this lost grace, and it calls out to the Tarnished, who were once exiled from the lands between, and it guides them back. So this is the starting point, or the impetus for the game itself, the Tarnished being called by the lost grace and returning to the lands between. I feel like one of the main themes of the game is how the player, the Tarnished, approaches or treats this newfound grace and this return to the land that they were once banished from. How they interpret this and its overall meaning in a deeper sense. It's not just the player character, of course. It's lots of characters in the game who are all beckoned back and will have their own adventures and motives. We want the player to discover for themselves what that means and how they want to begin their adventure. And that's about it, everyone. Straight from Miyazaki himself. I didn't think my hype could get any stronger, but there it is, through the roof. This last bit actually sheds some light on another video I am currently working on detailing the significance of gold in Elden Ring. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you in the next one.